Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. I hope you're doing well today. Today, as you can tell from the title, is a video, a thing like Goosebumps video. And this book I talked about when it was first announced, and I was really excited about it because one of my favorite writers of all time, plus Stein himself, which is my favorite writer of all time, Jonathan Maberry, was editing a book together that was a tribute to Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which I love, by Alvin Schwartz, and the art originally done by Stephen Gammell, and it was beautiful. I love that book. It's influenced my writing and all kinds of stuff. They put out a short story collection tribute to Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, kind of based around urban legends and folklore, very much like Schwartz's old book. And I reviewed this book on my previous, or not my previous channel, my other channel that I just started recently, called Mr. Wildboy 94. But I always talk about things that are like Goosebumps here on this channel, so I wanted to give you guys a review about this, especially in case you don't want to be subscribed to that channel as well, in case you don't like adult horror books and stuff, which is what I usually review on that channel anyway. I thought maybe you'd like this video, thought I'd go ahead and talk about it. Don't Turn Out the Lights, Jonathan Maberry, which is a phenomenal writer. I love his work. He's really good. The first things I ever read from him was the Pine Deep trilogy. If you haven't read those, you're really missing out. He also wrote the YA, young adult, whatever, series called Rot and Ruin, and they are phenomenal. They're so good. I might review those sometime on the channel too. They're like zombie scary stories, but they're YA, but they're still very much like a Goosebumps type thing. They are great. If you haven't read those, you really should. Benny Amira is one of my favorite characters of all time. He's like up there with Harry Potter for me. I would also say it's the best zombie series I've ever read. I like it better than Walking Dead Season 1, which is like my favorite zombie thing ever, aside from Night of the Living Dead, the old Romero film, or Dawn of the Dead, the Zack Snyder remake. So there's a lot to be said. Don't Turn Out the Lights. The title confused me all the time. Every time I'd look at the book, it would confuse me because I would keep thinking about that old Spider-Man play that used to be around called Don't Turn Off the Light, or Don't Turn Out the Light, whatever the title of that stupid play was that everybody kept getting injured and almost killed on. Don't Turn Out the Lights. This is, again, short story collection. Pretty thick book, too, for a Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark tribute book, which is like 70 or 80 pages a book. Now, mind you, I was not a fan of this book at all. I gotta be honest with you, I was very disappointed with this book. I was very let down. There's only really one story and a handful of stories I remember bits and pieces to that I'll kind of throw little things out there that I will talk about at some point. But I am not a big advocate for this book. I don't remember who did the art. I'll try to look around, but... Oh, it was Iris Compiette. She did the jacket art itself and the cover art, or the art for the different pictures in here. Of course, Stephen Gammell did the old art for the old Scary Stories books, and they were beautiful and great. Iris does a phenomenal job in here, too, and I really want to show some of her pictures in here to give her some credit, because she is the best thing about this whole book. As much as I love Maberry, as much as I love Stein, she is the best part of the whole book. There's going to be some things I'm going to say in here, too, that are going to really piss people off, probably, too. Just because I'm a big Stein fan, and his particular story might be the worst one in here. It was awful. It's one of the worst things Stein's ever written. I love Goosebumps. I love, well, I've not read Fear Street, but I love the idea of Fear Street. I love that it's like a teen slasher series, but not really a slasher, but kind of like a small murder mystery. Anyway, let's talk about some of the people in here. I'll just give you the names so you know who's involved here in case you just came across this channel and this review. Linda D. Addison, Courtney Alameda, or Alameda, whatever, Jonathan Auxier, Gary A. Braunbeck, Z. Brewer, Eric Cushing. Eric is kind of spelled interesting. That was A-R-I-C. John Dixon, Tena Nariv Due, or Dew. Jamie Ford, Cami Garcia, or Cami. It's probably Cami. Christopher Golden, Tanya Hurley, Catherine Jordan, Sherilyn Kenyon, Alethea Contis, N.R. Lambert, Laurent Lynn, Amy Lokovics, excuse me. Barry Liga, DJ McHale, who is also the creator, or co-creator of Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's very interesting. Actually, Spongy pointed that to me out on my other review for this on Mr. Wildboy 94, my other channel. Thank you, Spongy, for letting me know that. I don't remember his story, but I'll look around. Anyway, Josh Mallerman, excuse me, James O. Moore, Michael Northrop, and Michael Astow, or Astow, Joanna Parapinski, Brendan Reichs, Madeline Rowe, R.L. Stein, Margaret Stoll, Gabby Triana, Luis Alberto Uria, I don't know what that bang was, somebody dropped something upstairs, Rosario Uria, Kim Ventrella, Sherry White, TJ Woolridge, and Brenna Jovanoff. Yeah, pretty cool name. It sounds like a Black Widow name, like the character Black Widow. This is a big letdown. It's a big book. For what I usually read from these middle grade books, It's like almost 400 pages long. It's 384 pages, and it does not fly by at all. I'm going to show you around some of the art in here that I think was just wonderful from Iris Compiet. This book, when I first started reading it, was a story about a funeral portrait, and it was not good, and it kind of immediately put me off. Well, here's a great one, Jingle Jangle. I really like this story a lot. Really, really spooky picture. Really, really like that. Dude, Iris was just phenomenal on the art she did here. It was just, or he. I think it was a girl, though. The Weeping Woman, a really cool picture here. Really spooky. Some really good art in here. It was the best thing. She is the only person I'm convinced that is an actual big enough fan, even though R.L. Stine was in some of those other books, like, or he was in the documentary for the Scary Stories documentary that was made that was not very good, but he was in that, and I'm convinced he and Iris are the only people who know anything about that series. I think everybody else read it many years ago, like in the 80s when it was very controversial, maybe read it in the 90s, and then they forgot all about it and what it was like. So the big thing that got me, that I talked about in my other review, is that the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books, their stories, the short stories in there, they're terrifying, number one. Number two, they can be gory. Number three, they can be humorous. Number four, they are short. The longest one might be like 6 or 7 pages long. These stories in here will go on for 20 pages and 25 pages sometimes. Now, there are a couple in here that are kind of short, but when they're short, there's something like an Instagram story. Like in the sense of like people texting and talking about things, like there's one story about Pixtagram, which is an Instagram playoff, ripoff, whatever. And it's like a ghost that haunts Instagrams, like stalking a dude with Pixtagram. It's so stupid. There are things like that that are constantly done in here. Stine's story is horrible. It starts out really good. I was super interested in it, and by the end of that story, my mouth was on the ground. But I was just livid. It was awful. This book wasn't cheap either. This was like a $17 or $18 book, and it was awful. So Stine's story was like a ghost that was inside of a little boy's closet, and again, that premise right there sounds really cool. This ghost wants to scare that little boy, and so he wants to like come out of the closet and scare this kid. And when you get the reveal at the end of this story, it is the most insulting but also stupid and very sometimes Stine-like type of ending that I've ever seen in my life. As much as I love Stine, he does not do endings very well here lately with the Slappy World series. There are not many Slappy World endings that I liked. And this is a great example of one of his newer books that the ending is awful. It's completely off-putting. I had to put the book down at that point. Now mind you, I got this when it came out, like the week it came out. And I have been working on Don't Turn Out the Lights for months now. I got it in like October or August, whenever it came out, September. I started reading it then. I read like 150 pages of this book, and it was so bad I had to put it down. And I've been working on it ever since, like little piece by little piece. I'd read like 40 pages, or a couple of stories, really, that translate to like 40 pages. And then I'd move on and do something else, and then I'd come back to my Goosebumps channel, focus on that. And I just want to get this out of the way. It was unbelievable. It was just so bad. There's one story in here that's called like The Peacock or something, or The Portrait of the Peacock, is something like that. Basically a family, like, somehow they got like a picture of a peacock feather. And there's like a whole, and mind you, with Scary Stories Tell in the Dark, there's a whole lot of focus on urban legend and folklore, as I said. Scary stories that are kind of campfire stories, you know? Some of those stories are designed to be read and told directly around a campfire to make them more effective. These in this book would not work. Almost no story in here is scary. There's a couple of moments in here that were creepy, like in the Peacock story. The Peacock story I actually really liked. There are very few stories in here I like. And I'm talking like there might be like 2 stories in here, 3 stories at max that I think are worth your time reading. Many are awful in here, just completely off-putting. One was like a poem, which I know Scary Stories Tell in the Dark had a couple of those too, maybe just one. It was like the Didn't Need Me poem, you know? Pretty good. And here, it's awful. It's just... What? I feel like everyone involved with this book just either threw out a scary story they had already written, or a scary story that they had already written that was in their backlog, or a trunk story or something like that. They threw it out there to get it out of the way, said it was an urban legend focused story, and it wasn't. It felt like nobody in here had any clue what they were talking about. Now, Mayberry has an opening here talking about how he knows all about Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and I believe him, because I've read his books like the Pine Deep trilogy. He's great. He's really great. Mayberry knows what he's doing. You know, for anybody who doesn't know, he wrote the phenomenal novelization of the Wolfman remake from 2009. It was great. He's so good as a writer. His Joe Ledger series is really good. For some reason, he didn't write a story for this book. I know he was editing. I know he's a very, very busy man. He puts out like 3 books a year, if not more. The dude is phenomenal, But he should have been like the leading story in here. You know, I've heard him talk about his experience to like urban legends and horror movies. He loves black and white horror films. He grew up on that stuff. His grandmother told him all these urban legends about this stuff. I've been following Mayberry for like 10 years, dude. Pretty much have every book of his. I'm telling you, this man should have either written the entire book himself, every single story by himself, or he should have co-written it with somebody else and done most of the stories by himself, because he would have killed it. It would have been phenomenal. And Mayberry, if you're watching this, it's not too late. It's not too late to do that yourself. Just make a new one. Don't call it don't turn out the lights or whatever. This is embarrassing. This is frankly embarrassing. These stories are too long. They're too bloated. And it's not like they're long in the sense of, I'm an adult. I read adult horror and fiction and short stories too. I'm not saying they're too long because of that being 20, 25 pages. I'm saying they're too long because they're dull and they're not interesting and every kid would hate this book. Now the thing is, this is being put in the YA section of the stores. Maybe it is young adult. I think on the back it even says it's young adult. I would argue that you should have marketed to middle grade readers, personally. I was under the impression it was between that and YA, or both, somewhere in that ballpark. Some things in the middle grade section are kind of YA anyway, like Mary Downing Hahn. I don't know how she's not YA, she's more focused for kids, I guess because there's like kid protagonists in her stories that are more middle grade author era. I don't know, but Don't Turn Out the Lights has a lot of kids in it too, mostly. There's some really terrible stories in here. I'm going to go through the table of contents and kind of throw out some recommendations on some stories in here that I really liked. There are not many, so this will not take long. So, of course I talked about the Golden Peacock, which was really good. That's by Alethea Contis. The Knock Knock Man was very good, from Brenna Jovanoff. I really liked that. Let's see. There was a story in here, it's like the second story of the whole book, called The Carved Bear by Brendan Reichs. It was okay. I didn't hate that one. Copy and Paste, which is marked out, and then they wrote Kill beside it, is Barry Liga. I think that's the one, the Pixtagram story I was telling you about. That was so awful. Jingle Jangle by Kim Ventrella is very good. The Weeping Woman was good. So I think there was more than 2 stories, like 3 or 4 or 5 in here. But 5 out of like, it says 35 on the back over here. Out of like 5 out of 35 is not good. It's not good to only like that many in here. Let's see, what other ones can I remember in here? There's one here that I can't pronounce. It's like Hakishikusama by Catherine Jordan. It was kind of like a Japanese urban legend. It was really scary. I actually really liked that one. It really creeped me out. The Ghost in Sam's Closet is the R.L. Stine story that was just horrible. It was probably the worst one in here, frankly. As bad as the other ones are, and as bloated as the other ones are, that was the worst, easily. Let's see, I'm not really sure. One thing that pissed me off, this person named Z Brewer named their story Whistle Past the Graveyard, and that story wasn't awful, but that's literally a ripoff of Jonathan Mayberry's name of his short story collection called Whistling Past the Graveyard. Why would you steal that from him? Maybe he stole it from somewhere else, but it seems like it's too convenient, if you will, for me. The last story in here is called The Tall Ones, and I keep confusing it art-wise and in my head with another story called Long Shadows by James A. Moore. The Tall Ones is like, it's like an interesting story, but it was still kind of a rough one to end this book on. Essentially, it was like a town that may or may not have aliens coming to it, and you have to leave out gifts for these aliens. And if you don't, they kill you or take you away or whatever, take your parents away, something like that. And a new kid and his dad move into the town, or his parents, I think it's just him and his dad, move into the town. And the main character and everybody else keep trying to tell him, put out gifts for the aliens, or whatever they are. And he keeps saying, no, we're not going to do that. Well, then the kid tries to convince his dad to do it, and then you get the finale of that whole story. That was not a good note to end this book on. It just wasn't. There's a lot of missed opportunities in here. Number one, this book should have been divided into 4 books, or 3, you know? You could have pulled that off easily. It would have been a lot better. And have Iris do all of the art. For anybody who wants any advice in the future, hire Iris Compier, or Compiet, whatever her name is, or he, because they are fantastic. They're fantastic. The art in here is so good. It's so detailed, and it's spooky, and it's simplistic. That's the thing. It's like with Stephen Gamel's old Scary Stories books with Schwartz. The simplicity of those pictures is what made them terrifying. You might not even have a background to a photo. You might just have a face or a really scary-looking dead woman that has no eyes. You know, you might have something like that that really becomes effective. And some of these stories are so lame that Iris can't even come up with a good picture for it. Like the funeral portrait story I was talking about, the first story in here. There's nothing to do with that story. So literally she just drew a really like cartoonish Hello Neighbor picture of some guy in a portrait framing. You can't do but so much because these stories are so lame, dude. You know, I feel bad for Iris. I'd be insulted to have my name on here. I feel bad for Mayberry for having my name on here, too. I feel bad for Stein, sort of, kind of, because he wrote a really bad story, but also because my name's on here. This is a big letdown, dude. If I saw this thing saying it was a tribute to Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, I'd be livid if I bought it on that alone and not being a little bit warned. It seems like a lot of people on Goodreads are saying the same thing I'm saying, too. You know, I looked into that a little while back, and I was thankful to see I'm not crazy, that other people were saying the same thing I'm saying. This feels like it's saying it's a tribute as a way to say, we have a very lackluster short story collection, we had to find a way to sell it, get some good art, call it a Scary Stories tribute. That's what it feels like to me. I'm not trying to be rude, I'm not trying to be insulting, I'm being honest, which is not a thing anymore in the reviewing community on YouTube. It needs to be. People out there who want to read this because you're a Mayberry fan, you might as well not, because Mayberry is not involved, really. He's just the editor, which is important. It's very important in every book to have an editor that's good. And Mayberry knows his folklore and his urban legends, and I love and respect him for that. I love his work. Just pick out a Mayberry book. Just buy this for your collection. Don't read it. I don't like it. I don't think it's worth your time. I'm not very picky when it comes to books and stuff. I'm just not. I'm not very picky when it comes to movies. I have my interests. I usually pick them up, and I'm usually not that disappointed, honestly. I might have a bad ending to a story I really liked, but that's kind of common, you know? Some authors don't know how to end their books. It's just kind of common. So it just bums me out because this could have been really great. It really could have been. I love this green and black cover, like the mist and smoke to it. It's a very well done book in the sense of the art and the execution of putting things together, but for the most part, it's really, really bad. It's a big letdown. But at least there's like 5 stories in here that I liked. You know, just some really horrible ones. I cannot believe Stein's story was written by Stein. I almost don't want to believe that at all. Anyway, when it comes to Don't Turn Out the Lights, thank you for sitting through my long tangent of just frustration with this book. Again, I have a review that's about the same amount of depth on my Mr. Wild 194 channel. If I had to rate this book on a 5-star basis, I'd give it like a 2 out of 5 stars. It has some good stories in here, but it is such a low quality, it's not even like 2/10 of the whole book. So that's a big letdown. The stories are too long, dude. They don't need to be as long as they are. If they're like a 10-page story, I kind of get that, but like the 20 and 25-page stories don't need to be in here. They just don't. They're not good enough. There should have been some tight belt hitting, some beatings to make the story in these books better, or in this book, these stories better. I don't know. Anyway, what do you think about this book? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you disappointed the way I was about this book? Put your thoughts and comments down below. Thank you for watching. Again, 2 out of 5 stars for me. God bless you guys. Goodbye.